Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe and this is the news. It's Tuesday the 10th of September and we have got loads to get through today. We're going to be talking about Manchester United's next transfer targets. Rabiot is being mentioned, Eze is being mentioned. According to certain publications, Manchester United have already decided their next 4 targets. We'll be getting through those. We'll also be talking a little bit about Rasmus Hojlund. Peter Schmeichel's spoken about how United may be misusing him at Old Trafford. We'll get into that. And also, Alexis Sanchez talks about how the move to Man United wasn't very good for him. Yeah, the feeling's mutual, mate. Let's start with Eze. Get your thoughts in the comments, of course, as well. And this is from ESPN. It says here that Manchester United have identified Crystal Palace winger Eberechi Eze as a potential target for next summer, according to the MEN. 26-year-old who opened his account for the season last time out with a stunning long-range goal against Chelsea has a release clause of £68 million that will come into effect at the end of the season. Manchester United boss Erik ten Hag is keen to add more quality to his winger stocks following Sancho's exit to Chelsea and Marcus Rashford's ineffective form of late. Now, it's an interesting one with Eze because he's the sort of player where he's exciting, he's obviously very talented, he does good things. You look at his numbers and they aren't sort of overwhelming. Last season, 11 goals, 4 assists, which is decent. Season before that, 10 goals, 4 assists, which again is decent. But you know, like Marcus Rashford, who had one of the worst seasons of his career last year, he got 7 goals, 2 assists, which again is worse, but it's not like one of these players was being told that he's a disgrace and a failure and he should never play for Man United again, and the other one is being touted as a £68 million transfer to Manchester United. So it's an odd sort of situation that Eze finds himself in. And this is the other thing with Eze that sort of may surprise some people. He's 26. And I think because him and Elise have sort of had this kind of Eze and like they're almost like a sort of double act at Palace, where people mention them in the same breath so often. Elise's 22. Eze's 26 years old. He's not young. He's sort of approaching or in his peak. You know, and admittedly, he only played 27 league games, so to get 11 goals in that is pretty good. It's more than a goal every 3 games, which for a winger is decent. But he's not he's not a stats machine. He's not someone that absolutely pumps out goals. And obviously, it's more than we're seeing out of Rashford last season. It's more than we're getting out of Anthony, more than we got out of Sancho. But I do feel as though some of Eze's kind of aura, if I can use the modern term, is a little bit misplaced maybe. I mean, 11 goals, 6 assists in all comps last season. It's good. It's fine. It's not brilliant, is it? It's not fantastic. And I know Palace aren't a top team, but they had a good spell last year and he was a part of that, and he scored against Man United, of course. But again, I just feel like, is that good enough to be worth £70 million? 11 goals, 6 assists. The season before that, it was 10 goals, 4 assists. The season before that, 1 goal, 1 assist. I mean, that was an injury-ravaged season, but you know, even so, he's not someone who is sort of banging goals in throughout his career. The year before that, 3 years ago, 4 goals, 6 assists. And again, 3 years ago, he was only a young man. He was 23. He wasn't young. I just think that, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm quite on the same hype train with Eze that everyone else is. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. The comments aren't loading for me at the moment, but we'll get into that in just a second. Yeah, they're not loading, so get your thoughts on the comments. Let's talk about the next one of those 4 targets as well then. So up next is Jarrad Branthwaite, who United obviously have been linked with a lot during the summer transfer window. They have made bids for him up to 50-60 million, according to some. I think 55 million seems to be the number that people stuck on for that bid. Rejected by Everton. Now, Everton have started the season very poorly. They're looking very porous in terms of goals conceded. They're looking like a team that's going to struggle to stay in the Premier League this season. How will that affect his value at the end of this summer? At the end of this season? We'll have to wait and see. But obviously, Jarrad Branthwaite's a player that United value very highly. And the thing to remember is, at the end of this year, Johnny Evans' contract runs out. At the end of this year, as it stands, unless we extend it, Harry Maguire's contract runs out. At the end of this year, as it stands, Victor Lindelof's contract runs out. So United could feasibly lose 3 centre-backs. So we signed 2 this year. There could be another 2 or 3 coming next year as well. And if Everton get relegated, for instance, you're probably getting Jarrad Branthwaite for closer to 30 million than the 75 million that they wanted this summer. That's obviously something to consider as well. So I think the idea that we're already looking for our next targets, to me, is a very good sign. You can see as well, a left-back is the last item on the agenda. Luke Shaw and Tyrone Malacia have proven far too injury-prone during their time at Old Trafford, and a natural right-back, Diogo Dello, currently fills the position. 22-year-old Girona defender Miguel Gutierrez saw his name linked with United this summer after securing Champions League football in his homeland, so a move for the Spaniard could be re-established in a year's time, or another player altogether. Right, there you go. So we're looking for a left-back, and it could be him, could be someone else. There's the news on that front. Are the comments working for you, producer Ben? Are you seeing any comments? Because I'm not seeing anything. So apologies if you're in the chat and I haven't replied. They're just not loading for me at all. There we go. We can see some there now. Omet says Rashford hasn't been on it for an age. Yeah, I mean, it's been over a season at this point, hasn't it? Brendan Wood says we don't need Rabiot. We're better off with another younger signing. At this point, it's hard to know. Like, as Sneezer Lasagna says, the window's shut. There's no alternative to Rabiot. It would be okay if it was a short contract with sensible wages. Exactly. Yeah, a younger, someone for the future, a Ugarte-aged player or someone like that would be great. But we need, if we're going to get anyone in now, it has to be a free transfer, and that's where Adrien Rabiot comes in. So if we can go on, obviously our next story being Adrien Rabiot, let's talk about him a little bit, because he is on a free transfer, currently doesn't have a club after his time at Juventus ended in the summer. 29 years old, and his representatives are working hard to fix him up with a new club with the 24-25 campaign well underway. Now, this is according to, is this One Football? Football Insider, which I don't love that. I don't love that as a name, actually. It sounds like someone's sat on something that they shouldn't have. I don't like that at all. Nevertheless, his demands remain too costly for United, who are long-term admirers of Rabiot, who's also a target for clubs in Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Do you think that we should be trying to bring him in? Because he is a player that can play in midfield. I mean, obviously he's a midfielder, but he can play in midfield in a system that Ten Hag wants. He could maybe be that sort of Scott McTominay kind of player. But then on the other hand, Scott McTominay was no transfer fee. Scott McTominay will be on less wages than Rabiot. Obviously, I think Rabiot's a better player, but is it sensible selling McTominay for 30 million, bringing Rabiot in on a free on double, triple the wages, maybe not triple, double the wages that McTominay was on? Does that seem like a good idea? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it does. Why would you swap McTominay for Rabiot? I guess the difference is you can have one and 30 million transfer fee that we got from McTominay. But to me, I don't know about this. I'm not sure. CTB says I'd rather overpay Rabiot for a 1-year contract than sign him for 5 years. It couldn't be a 5-year contract. He's 29 years old. United would have to give him a 2-year maybe contract plus an optional third, something like that. Something like that. Trig Trag says also we don't need another U player for the spot. We need some experienced young player. We bought an 18-year-old African CDM. Yeah, Ugarte is also on the younger side. Why not get an experienced 3-year bridge? Obviously bringing in Ugarte for a shorter spell to make sure that by the time Casemiro retires, by the time certain players have got into the squad and up to speed, that Rabiot has kind of bridged that gap and made sure we're still a good team in the meantime. Because that's the problem with the rebuild. If you're properly going for it, which it seems like United are, getting out players like Sancho and others, United are going to be thin in certain areas. If you're doing a rebuild properly, you're going to be a little bit thin, and players like Rabiot can help bridge that gap while you've got the proper rebuild going on in the background. As long as we don't give him a 4-year deal or a 5-year deal, something stupid, then I think it does make sense personally. Gavin Barker says, if Everton get relegated, why would we want Branthwaite? Look for a better defender in the Championship. Yeah, but just because they get relegated doesn't mean it's his fault. I'm not saying that he's the perfect player for Man United, but if United want him and he got relegated, like when Jack Grealish, United wanted him, clubs wanted Jack Grealish, Aston Villa went down to the last day to whether they stayed up in the Premier League or not. If they'd have lost that game, would Jack Grealish all of a sudden become a terrible player? I know he's not done amazingly for City, but he went to City for 100 million that summer and won the treble the year after, playing a lot of games for him. If they happened to have lost that last game that season, he wouldn't just become shit all of a sudden, would he? He'd still be the same Jack Grealish, just playing for a team that's not great. I think that's the situation, personally, with Jared Branthwaite. Daniel Riley says, Roy Keane came from a relegated Nottingham Forest. Yeah, there you go. There's a lot of players like that. Michael Taylor says, just look at Andy Robertson. Yeah, he was at Hull, wasn't he, when they got relegated, and then went to Liverpool, 6-7 million, whatever it was, and been one of their better players ever since. Tyler Wood says Branthwaite is worth 30 million. Just sit it on the table and wait. No need to overpay. Big Chopper says, morning Joe, and this, let's get into this. Sorry to ask you to meow for me the other day, which looking back sounds like something that you would get on OnlyFans rather than YouTube, doesn't it? Sat by the pool in Malaga listening to the pod. Thank you. And yeah, apology accepted, but let's not do that again, eh? Come on, let's be sensible here. Serenity says people moaning at possibly signing a 21-year-old, can't only sign young and up and coming. Experience is massive. I think he's 27 you said. I think he's 29. Sohail Das as well, thank you for joining the academy. Thank you for becoming a member. Let's move on to our next story. This is Peter Schmeichel criticising, he loves doing this, doesn't he? Criticising the way that we have used Rasmus Hojlund. He says, delving into more detail, Schmeichel opined, he's a very impressive young person. He's far older than the 21-year-old he is. He has a great perspective. He's very sensible and cheeky. All of the things you want in a young striker. He also said less kind words about United's use of the striker, claiming it's not just Rasmus. Great. So not only is Rasmus being played in the wrong position, everyone is. The team is not playing him right. So there are many things that need to be corrected. Does he go on to say what he's not playing, how he's not playing them right, or how he should be playing him? Or does he just say he's not playing him right and I'll keep the information close to my chest about how he could fix that? That's it. The club aren't playing him right. Okay, cheers, right, get rid of that. Cheers, Peter, thank you. What in the Rumpelstiltskin is that? Just leaving a little trail of clues. You're not playing him right, but I'll never tell you how you should be playing him. Give us the deets, man. Tell us properly. You're not playing him right. Let's just put it this way. You're not playing him right. Okay. And I don't want to say any more. I don't want to help you fix it. The club that I was at for 6 years. I don't want to help you fix it. Or how long was he at United, Schmeichel? 8 years? You can fix it yourself. You can sort it out. I watch him every week. He plays for the country that I'm from. I've known him probably about him since about 15. I could maybe help United here. But why do that when I can just tell you you're doing something wrong and then walk off into the distance? It's a shame, isn't it? Speaking of doing something wrong, Alexis Sanchez has been speaking about his transfer to Manchester United, and he said that he wanted to terminate his contract just to... I haven't read this yet. Alexis Sanchez has revealed he wanted to terminate his contract just a day after he joined. The high-profile forward scored 80 times for Arsenal, admitted thinking twice about his move to United. Alexis, who dazzled during his time in North London, was initially on course to join City before a dramatic late switch saw him don the United jersey instead. Right, what does he say here? Before I had an agreement with City, but due to football issues, I accepted the opportunity to go to United. It felt tempting and it was something good for me. Okay, now what? I liked this club a lot when I was a kid. Eventually I signed, but I didn't ask for information on what was happening inside the club. Sometimes there are things that you don't realise until you get there, and I remember the first training I had, I realised a lot of things. He added, after the session I got home and told my family and agent, can you not rip up the contract to go back to Arsenal? They laughed. I told them there's something that doesn't sit right. It doesn't seem good, but I already signed. I was already there. After a few months, I carried on having the same feeling. We weren't united as a team in that moment. I wonder what was going on. We could all see it from the outside, couldn't we? That things weren't working under Jose Mourinho. There were rifts in the squad. People seemed to be falling out with each other. But the fact that Alexis Sanchez can turn up there on the biggest wages he'd ever been on, so you'd think he'd be happy about that, and that wasn't enough for him to smile and grin and bear what was going on at Manchester United at the time. It tells you how toxic it must have been when you've got players and managers falling out, players falling out with each other, people not trying, people fining each other for turning up late because they couldn't be arsed doing stuff. It has been mental at United in recent years. And the fact that someone that I would say is one of the worst transfers in our history in terms of what we got for the money we paid him in terms of wages, and how it ruined the wage structure and the contract structure at Manchester United, that we're still kind of fixing now. The likes of Jadon Sancho's wages, David De Gea's wages, probably even Casemiro's wages, you can put, not exclusively, and I'm not blaming Alexis Sanchez, I'm blaming the people who did this deal, but a lot of that you can put on the deal that we made for Alexis Sanchez. Even despite all of that, he knew things were wrong, and it's horrible, isn't it? I wonder what that feeling must have been. Horrible for him. You turn up and you go, shit, these lot are fucked. And that's the thing that United have had, and hopefully That's the thing that United are getting rid of now. That's one of the things that Ineos have to do. Like, we can talk about tactics all we want. We can talk about players. We can talk about wages. We can talk about this, that and the other. The feeling he had when he joined Manchester United is what Ineos have to get rid of. And maybe we'd already started getting rid of it. Maybe Solskjaer got rid of it. Maybe it's not been there for a few years now. But this thing of big name players, who's very successful at Arsenal, one of the best players in the league the year before we signed him. I think the best player in the league that year. Turns up and within one training session goes, these lot aren't right. Something's not right here. We need to change that feeling. And this is what I'm talking about. Do you know what I say about not everything is tactics, not everything is data that you can see on a pitch of where the manager tells the players to be. This is the sort of thing I'm on about. They hadn't played a game yet. They hadn't seen anything. Sanchez didn't know what United's tactics were yet. He couldn't possibly have learned them in one session. But he got there and he knew these lot aren't right. And that's what we need to fix. And that's the sort of thing that when you get that right, people will buy into the tactics more. People buy into the fans more. The ownership and the team and the managers and the coaches, everything starts working together. And when you're pulling in the same direction and new transfers turn up and go, this is it. Look at the scale of this place. This is how it feels to be at a big club. Not, can I rip my contract up day one? That's the difference, and those things matter a lot more than people want to accept they do, because you can't put a number on it. How transfers feel, how players feel at Man United. There's no stat, there's no data, there's no XG for it. Alexis Sanchez transfer was doomed to fail the day he turned up because something wasn't right at Man United. And was he right or was he wrong? He was right, wasn't he? Adam Kenny says, Ole started the rebuild and the Glazers effed it up with bad prices. Only under new owners can we actually rebuild. Omit says, Captain Hindsight, there's no way he knew. Not much going on between his ears. I mean, unless he's lying about ringing his agent saying, this is garbage here, something's wrong, can we change the contract? He did know. He had a feeling, didn't he? He had a feeling in his gut saying something's wrong here, and he was right. He was. Brandon Wood says, Sanchez was utter garbage. Only other transfer that was just as bad was Pogba. Overpaid, overrated, waste of 90-odd million. I disagree. I think Pogba had a lot of good games for United. And Sanchez was utter garbage. I'm not defending his performances, but what he said there is valid. He's a human being that's meant to come in as one of the talisman of the squad. Rumours of 300, 400 grand a week, whatever. You know, there's some truth to some of it. Probably not 450 like some outlets said, but let's say it was 300. He's your big boy. He's your big name that's just come in, and he turns up on day one and goes, "This is rubbish. This isn't right." That to me is real. That's a real thing, and United have to fix that sort of thing. Ibby says Glazers killed all hope of rebuilding the squad. I don't know why you're saying that. Let me know what you mean. Do you mean in that moment or do you mean now? Because fair enough, at that time, yeah, I completely agree. Jockey Trot says, as time goes on, it shows how horrible the Woodward era was for United. Glazers out. It was an utter disaster, wasn't it? Those 10 years, or what was it, 8 years, 7 years, that Ed Woodward was in that role at Manchester United, so few things went right. Like, if you think of, like, let's say Man United had no CEO during that time. They just sort of trundled on the tracks. Obviously, things you might slow down, you might veer off in a different direction. You know, no leadership whatsoever, no guidance. And it was just the manager and the players and the board kind of doing things, muddling together. Would it have even been any worse? How much worse could it have been? Like, if it was me doing it or you doing it, could it really have been that much worse? Overpaying for everyone, not getting any money when you sell players, sacking managers and bringing in managers with completely different philosophies, then selling all the players that they bought for massive losses, then buying more players in that didn't really even make sense for the next manager, then repeating that cycle over and over again, and they're all on massive wages so no one wants them. Could it have been much worse? Other than bankrupt, you know, obviously we enter the realm of bankrupting football teams, which would have been worse. But the idea of a CEO being any worse than Ed Woodward was, it's genuinely hard to fathom how he could have been. Except, you know, financially destroying Manchester United. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Phobos Tacoman says, Sir Alex and David Gill living at the same time was under disaster. Exactly, yeah. NXT says, we could have all ran United 100%. We could have run it as well as they did. Now, I don't think I could run it better than, you know, Berardi, who's been at City, and Ashworth, who's been West Brom, Brighton, Newcastle, England. I don't think I could run it better than them. I think me and you lot, all together, we could have ran United. We could have done Ed Woodward's job as well as he did. I genuinely believe that. and that's an absolute disgrace. That's an absolute disgrace. Right, that's going to be all from me this morning. We're back later today with Uncensored. Me and Adam McCullough going through, we talked about Peter Schmeichel talking about Rasmus Hojlund, the the striking options that Manchester United have and how we can get a little bit more out of them, how we can get more goals going, and also on Newcastle in for Anthony. We'll get into that later on. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been the news on Tuesday the 10th of September. We'll see you in a bit.